business. Continue.
Ahia, the Most High your power, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your power. Verse 39. And if thy brother that dwelleth by thee be waxed poor, and be sold unto thee, thou shalt not compel him to serve as a bondservant.
So he's saying, if it happens that this brother falls on hard times and he wants to sell himself to you, he's saying, thou shalt not compel him to serve as a bondservant. And we're going to get into exactly what a bondservant is here in the upcoming scriptures. But Israel cannot have another Israelite as a bondservant, is what he's saying. Continue.
Verse 40. But as an hired servant.
But as a hired servant. There's nothing wrong with having a brother who you pay for his labor. A bondservant isn't paid for his labor. Continue.
And as a sojourner, he shall be with thee and shall serve thee unto the year of Jubilee.
So ultimately, this contract or agreement that you would have with the brother to be a hired servant, it couldn't last any more than 50 years. Because we know a Jubilee is a Sabbath of years. And when we say Sabbath, that's another word of saying seven. 7 of sevens. So you have 7 sevens of years. That's 49 years. That next year is the 50th year and is considered the Jubilee. We're going to deal in that a little more too. In doing this lesson, I realized it's probably good to go into a lesson on the Jubilee in itself, because the Jubilee, it was a efficient tool in governing the people of the land. That way, if someone became my hired servant, when the Jubilee came, I had to release him. Rather, the Jubilee was the next year, or the Jubilee was 50 years from the time our contract took place. And with this, the Most High knew that there was no way that someone could continue to reign over someone else. The Most High's, there's no other way to govern a people than how the Most High set it up. It's so righteous. Not only did you have to release someone that you had took into as a hired servant, but if you had bought land from someone else that was of another tribe or had another father, and this was another man's inheritance, you had to release that land on the Jubilee as well. So you didn't have anyone acquiring all of Israel unto themselves when we're talking about land. So he governed, the Most High set these laws into place so that it would govern it efficiently, that no one was to rule over anyone else. And that the economy was not to shift in any one specific person's influence, which is totally different than today. The more you look into the law of the Most High, the more you see why our world today is so wicked. And these things, these wicked, lawless things that we have grown up with throughout the years since we were children, don't even seem like there's another way of doing it. You know, being born into a wicked society, unless you go to the scriptures, then wickedness is all you know. That's why it's so important that we understand the law and we understand what the scripture is saying to us, because it gives us the guideline to what is righteous. All right, what scriptures we leave off on? 39?
Yeah, no, we're at 41.
Okay, go ahead and read that. Read 40 again for me.
Okay. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 40. But as an hired servant and as a sojourner, he shall be with thee and shall serve thee until the year of Jubilee.
The year of Jubilee, they're released. Continue.
Verse 41. And then shall he depart from thee, both he and his children with him, and shall return unto his own family, and unto the possession of his father shall he return.
So this law of Jubilee also pertains to any land that may have been sold, as I said, as well as the family of that hired servant. So the hired servant took himself and his land, and he went back to wherever it was that he came from. So it was to return to the original owner. And let's look at that a little bit. Let's go to Leviticus 25 and 28. Go ahead and read that when you get it, brother.
Leviticus chapter 25, verse 28. But if he be not able to restore it to him, then that which is sold shall remain in the hand of him that hath bought it until the year of Jubilee.
So this is referring to what I was just speaking of. So if a brother is falling on hard times and he's an Israelite and he sells some of his land to another Israelite, just so he could put himself in a better situation, well, he can pay upon that land to receive it back. And this scripture here is saying, but if he be not able to restore it to himself, basically he's saying if he can't pay on it to receive his land back, it says, then that which is sold shall remain in the hand of him that bought it. So if I can't pay to get this land back, then whoever I sold it to, he keeps it. But it goes on and it says he shall remain in the hand of him that has bought it until the year of Jubilee. So he can keep it. If I can't pay to get it back, he can keep it, but only till the year of Jubilee. It says, and in the Jubilee it shall go out, and he shall return unto his possession. So if he hasn't paid for it by the Jubilee, or if he can't pay for it, then when Jubilee comes, he receives his land back. So imagine that today. That's unheard of. I know the Jubilee is 50 years, but still, that may be, a man may die not receiving his land, but his seed and his posterity will receive that land back. Imagine if that had happened to us. You know, I run across so many, through my line of work, I run across so many Edomites that, you know, they say, oh, I'm going to my dad's farm this weekend. And their dad's farm is like 25 and 60 acres somewhere off in the middle of the Midwest. You know, and that's been passed down from generation to generation. You know, or I'm going to the lake. My dad has a spot off of the lake. And they've been owning this spot off the lake for years upon years. Generations upon generations. And here we are. We're happy to have a house. You know, and to have a backyard. We haven't been able to pass anything down. But, you know, that goes into a whole nother long story as well. But it's just to make the point that's being made here. The Most High did this so that, even though it may take 50 years for you to get your heritage back, or the land that should be passed on to your son, you still got it back. Your family was able to still continue and to live off the land, because land is different than how we know prosperity today. We look at prosperity as money. But actual prosperity is being able to have land to live upon. That's what money really is, the things that come from the land. Whether you have stock that live on the land, where you can make your own clothes and have food from it. The land gives food to you as well as to the livestock that you may have. That's prosperity. And so rather than losing that prosperity by selling it through the generations, they received it back at the Jubilee. Now let's jump up to verse 23. We just read 28. Let's look at chapter 25, verse 23.
Leviticus chapter 25, verse 23. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine.
So the Most High is saying the land doesn't even belong to you. Who are you to sell it? It shall not be sold forever. Continue.
For ye are strangers and sojourners with me.
You're strangers to this land. This is my home, and I'm allowing you to be here. Continue.
Verse 24. And in all the land of your possession, ye shall grant a redemption for the land.
So the Jubilee is the redemption point. All right. The Jubilee was used to keep everything fair. The price of goods were determined by the Jubilee so that no one was taken advantage of. The Most High had set things up where the nation would thrive together without one or a select few rising to power through the economy or any other means. And I think that's something that would serve us well if we went into one day. And I think that's something I'm gonna present. So let's go back to Leviticus. Actually, let's stay in Leviticus 25 and let's go to verse 42. We left off at 41. Read 41 again.
Okay. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 41. And then shall he depart from thee, both he and his children with him, and he shall return unto his own family, and unto the possession of his father shall he return.
So that's how Israel should deal with Israel. If a brother falls on hard times, you can use him you can have him as a hired servant, but you must release him on the Jubilee. Continue.
Verse 42. For they are my servants, which I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. They shall not be sold as bondmen.
Israel is meant to be the servant of the Most High. It is always meant to be that. From the beginning, that was the purpose of him taking out a people for himself, was to serve the Most High. That's why he took us out of Egypt, because we were being servants unto man. So he's taken us out of Egypt and brought us to Canaan so that we could reassume our true purpose, to serve him. Continue.
Verse 43. Thou shalt not rule over him with rigor, but shall fear the Most High.
Now we know that in our existence in the so-called New World, starting from Canada on down to South America and all the islands that surround it, that we have been serving with rigor in the history of this land. Not just us here in America as so-called black people, but also the Hispanics throughout South America, Central America. And in many times, when you do the history upon them, they were treated, even in different situations, worse than we were. We know our history better. But when you look into the history of our Hispanic brothers and sisters, they were treated as bad and even worse than we were. And we were ruled over with rigor. And the Most High is saying here that that's not supposed to be. Continue with verse 44.
Verse 44. Both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, which thou shalt have, shall be of the heathen that are round about you. And of them shall ye buy bondmen and bondmaids.
So this goes back to what we were looking at when we were coming out of Egypt, when I made the point of mentioning the fact that when we came out of Egypt, also came with us a mixed multitude that were not Israelites. So it says, both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, which thou shalt have, shall be of the heathens that are round about you. Of them shall ye buy bondmen and bondmaids. Now, understand too, when we went into Canaan, there were bondmaids and there were heathens all surrounded all throughout Canaan. So I'm sure some of these bondmaids and men probably came from them as well. But who came out of Egypt with us were also heathens. Now, to look into this word a little more, bondmen, in the Hebrew concordance, the number for that word is H5650, and it's pronounced ebed. And the definition of it is a servant, a male servant. So basically, it's not paid. You don't get paid for being a bondmaid. And it's not a slave in the sense that we know a slave, because in a sense they became like family. They were taken care of. They were fed. They were clothed. They were, and not as a lesser person. It's just that they couldn't afford to live in the land themselves. So they took on work to provide for themselves. They became bondmen. They were bound to whoever it was they were working for. And a bondmaid is the same thing, only a female version. It's a maid's servant or a female slave. And like I said, they were never ruled upon rigorously like we have been. All right. So right here in verse 44, we see that only the heathen are to be bound to servitude as a possession, not Israel possessing itself or being possessed by anyone other than the Most High. That's why when you see scriptures that are speaking of the prophecy of Israel, and it says the Most High will bring again their captivity, he's not speaking about bringing their captivity under man. He's saying when he will bring Israel's captivity back under him in the land of Israel. Okay? Now let's look at a scripture pertaining to this the heathens being bondmen and bondwomen. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 60. We're coming back to Leviticus, but for now let's go to Isaiah chapter 60, verse 12.
Isaiah chapter 60.
I'm gonna grab some water real quick.
Mm-hmm. You put it on pause?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You can start reading it actually.
Okay. Isaiah chapter 60, verse 12. For the nations and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish.
Read it again.
For the nation and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish.
All right, this scripture